Once upon a time in a peaceful city, there was a son of a high-ranking noble family who ruled the academy like a king. His name is Ed Rothstaller. He is having problems regarding himself being removed from the family register. He was even ridiculed by the students at the academy. As Ed sees it, he is someone who entered the gaming world with a background in a magic academy. And he entered his favorite game entitled The Failed Swordmaster of Sylvania. But unlucky for him, because he entered this game as a criminal character who was thrown out of the dormitory. He seemed to look very depressed, and when he looked at his stats, Ed only got an intelligence of 7. That's very little considering he went to a magic academy. Ed seemed to look annoyed, because why did he have to enter the body of this useless person? But he insisted that he would change the course of his life for the better. Ed experienced the worst scenario of being disowned by his family. However, he has not been expelled from school, and he plans to graduate from the academy well. Because when you graduate, your future will be guaranteed. Now the problem is the academy's tuition fees, but he plans to get a scholarship to be free with bad stats like this. But what is needed now is that Ed must survive after he was kicked out by his own family. He has to prepare everything to go to school in 10 days. Ed started chopping wood, and from this activity he used wind spells, but it drained almost all of his energy. Then he was hungry and started cooking. He cooked a piece of wood that his grandfather taught him, but when he ate it, the taste didn't match his expectations, and that made him frustrated. At that time, he thought about making a house out of this wood. Ed started making his house from the wooden branches he collected earlier, then making it with difficulty, and this activity really drains his energy. Finally, the house was finished. When Ed finished building his house, he got experience from his life skills in his system, and it turns out that in this game, there is a life skill system too. And now he made a harpoon to catch fish in the river. Ed managed to catch the fish and immediately grilled it, and he greedily ate it. But at the same time, a strange woman appeared approaching him. Then Ed was shocked. He met an academy student named Princess Penia, and he was the one who kicked Ed out of the dormitory. This student's name is Penia Elias Kroll. She activated insight into Ed because of his cheating, as a result of which she was expelled from the dormitory. But Penia is angry. Why is he still at this school? And she will tell the school committee about this. But what Ed was thinking about right now was not Penia's chatter, but his fish food which had burned because he was hungry. At that moment, Ed started saying intimidating words to Penia. But unexpectedly, when Penia started to get ready, it turned out that Ed looked down to thank her. Penia also activated insight. It turned out that Ed was honest in what he said, and he wasn't lying. Ed thought that his family's name, which was already known for its infamy, would have a bad impact on him. But he had been removed from the family. It was better than another terrible thing. But now he had to convince Penia without lies like this. In her current clothes, without an escort and going into the forest alone. Ed thought that Penia was carrying out a quest from Professor Glast, namely a class placement test. When discussing Ed's plans to exchange, Penia had to promise that she would not expel Ed from the academy. And in return, Ed had to tell Penia the location of the placement quest. Penia finally got what she wanted on Ed's instructions. She knew very well Ed's attitude 3 days ago, and now he was different. At the academy, the students were told to bring beads by Professor Glast, which had become his quest for class selection. And from those results, only 3 students managed to complete it. One of the 3 students is not Penia. It was not without reason that Ed made a deal with Penia, because since childhood she had received flattery and a misleading way of thinking, thus honing her insight skills, and no one ever ran away from her insight. That's why Ed did it. Even if Ed managed to avoid being expelled, all the information he had would be useless. Then another selected student is Lucy Merrill, and still the future may not change. On the other hand, Penia seems to be hiding her true identity, because she was embarrassed by her special behavior if her identity was known. Therefore, she wanted to prove to himself that taking the bead would give the best results in the test. But she didn't take it. If Penia took the bead with Ed's help, it's the same as cheating, so Penia wants if she gets the bead, it will come from her own strength. She saw the truth of himself from her insight ability, that if she took the bead, she would get a disaster in the future. She didn't want. Peenia thinks Ed's words are the truth, and she is annoyed with Ed's words. Then Peenia will prove to Ed herself that she can do it. Finally, 10th day arrived, and Ed returned to his school, namely Sylvania Academy. Ed immediately ate heartily, even though many people were talking about him, but he didn't pay attention to it. Then there was one student who had a different view. This woman saw that Ed seemed different from before. His first day in semester 2 was very bad, because it was all Peenia's doing. Ed had to be able to face it. He had to be careful so that the original story didn't deviate. And he started hunting rabbits in the forest. This makes his combat skills improve. While Ed was hunting, he saw a schoolgirl under a tree. The student's name was Janica Failova. Ed seemed to know that woman. But suddenly the female student approached Ed, and this was confusing because they had not previously met. Janica talked to Ed a lot about this forest. Ed was a little surprised, and he praised Janica a little. And it seems like they're talking to get along with each other. Janica showed something to Ed. She seemed to be holding something, which turned out to be a spirit. But Ed couldn't see the spirit. Then he left because his business here was finished. Ed already knows about the storyline of this game, so he can't be wrong about this. Janica is someone he shouldn't be close to right now. It turns out she was assessing Ed's behavior. Janica has tried to look good in front of Ed, but it's not good. And she would probably do it again if we met again. Unexpectedly, Janica always took part in whatever activities Ed did, from going to school to the afternoon activities. But Ed finds out that Janica has been following him all this time. Ed immediately shouted at Janica by telling her about his family's scary background, but Janica didn't judge Ed from that. She knew that Ed had a different nature, and he knew that Janica was like that too. Ed knows about Janica's nature, knowing that in the future Ed can't just respond to her. Because Janica Palarova is the final boss in Act 1. Besides that, Ed tries to change things a little with her by asking for help. Ed asks Janica for help in the form of money, because now his life is very messy. Ed knows Janica's weakness because she too is a poor person living on a small farm. She has survived on scholarships so far. Finally, Janica left Ed's place because she couldn't fulfill his wishes. He planned to stay away from important characters so that the original story would not get sidetracked. When opened his treehouse, Ed was surprised to see the strongest character in his favorite game sleeping there. Her name was Lucy Merrill. Lucy was awakened by Ed's voice and immediately told her that there was a large wolf following him. Ed was shocked to hear this. Then Lucy told him that the wolf was talking about saving Janica in the future, whatever the cost. The next day arrived. That day was a joint combat training day, namely one-on-one sparring practice. The following are the names of the strongest academy fighters. But Ed already knows that the protagonist is the failed swordmaster, Taylor, in this game, and he looked forward to the fight. Ed already knew the outcome of all these fights, so he didn't think too much about all the fights, except one person. Then Janica came over to Ed with a happy face and invited him to chat. When he saw the list, it turned out that he was also emotional about fighting. If in the game story Ed Rothtaylor had actually been expelled, and he was confused about who his opponent was. But what was waiting for the battle from the Mac in this game, Taylor, arrived. In the outside world, he's been living as Taylor for the same amount of time, from the horrific ending to the truth, leaving a deep impression. And now he entered the game world as an antagonist character, so he could only encourage him. Taylor's opponent is Lucy, who Ed met in the forest a while ago. Lucy is the strongest character in this game. The protagonist of this world is a born sword fighter who has never held a sword before. But with one swipe of his sword, he can cut through Lucy's fast lightning magic. Then the supposedly successfully blocked magic caught her off guard. Taylor immediately approached Lucy with her speed. Lucy, who was shocked, attacked Taylor with mid-level lightning. Then the Mick was bombarded with magic that was released continuously. And finally in the match Lucy was disqualified for using intermediate level magic. That's one of the story plots in his favorite game scene. The two of them finally started fighting. Taylor made the first attack, but Lucy immediately counterattacked with her water magic. Taylor was also hit by a magic attack, so he bounced far back against the wall. Everyone was shocked to see this, how easily he was defeated, and why he ran to attack with his bare hands against the mage. In the story of this game, it is shown that Taylor is an ordinary student who was born in the village. Someone who never got good grades in school and labelled as a failed student. But he didn't give up. Taylor got up from his slump and started attacking Lucy with full force. Ed knows the story of this game, that Lucy will use lightning magic next. But beyond the predictions of this game's storyline, Lucy instead casts a strange magic that blocks Taylor's attack. Ed was shocked to see this incident. Taylor was hit by a counterattack from Lucy and was thrown far away until he hit the wall. Ed was really surprised that Lucy didn't use electric magic like in the story. The story here is different, that Lucy uses wind magic to defeat Taylor. Lucy won the fight. Ed was completely shocked to see this. Taylor was completely defeated, and he left the place with his head lowered. Ed couldn't allow this. The wind magic attack was a spirit that Lucy found in the forest when Ed met her, and that made Lucy even stronger. Besides that, Ed is chasing Taylor, even though now it's a fight between Ed and Pina. Ed simply ignored Pina. He immediately chased Taylor, because in the story Mac had to immediately get up and take his sword, even though in the future Taylor would lose to Ed. Ed tried to convince Taylor that he lost with honor and needed to get up immediately. This was done so that the game story wouldn't make things difficult for Ed. People were shocked by Ed's words to Taylor. Is it appropriate for someone to use their seniors' rights to bully their juniors and change the test results? But he was that kind of person in the past. Pina assessed Ed through her insight. He had changed because of yesterday's events, which made her even more confused. And with this duel, hopefully, she will get the answer. Pina started casting light water magic attacks towards Ed, while hoping he would respond to her attacks and fight properly for the answer to appear. But unexpectedly, Ed was hit by the light water attack so easily. Pina was surprised at how easily she was hit by a light water attack. Then Ed admitted defeat, and the winner of this fight was Pina. People also make fun of Ed, but Pina knew that Ed deliberately didn't dodge her attack. In this duel, it seemed like Ed wasn't interested in his fight with Pina. Because in the game scenario, Ed has to be careful when acting, and if not, it could affect the storyline. Because Pina is an important character in the story of this game. But right now, the important thing is to catch up McTaylor. At the same time, Pina appeared with an angry face. Because why didn't Ed seriously duel with her? And all he wanted was to get out of the arena as soon as possible. Pina currently has a lot on her mind. Plus, Ed's actions have made her curious and angry with him. Then Ed tried to calm Pina. Pina finally calmed down with a red face. At the same time, she also confided in Ed. But at times like this, he had to help the Mick as soon as possible. And he didn't have time to hear Pina's ramblings. However, Pina speculates that Ed is trying to get out of his family because he has a dark side, and tries to get close to Taylor to give Ed an excuse because he was kicked out by his family. But he denied it and began to answer Pina's statements, even though most of them were lies. Pina knew he was lying because she used insight. Pina was increasingly angry because Ed's answer was a lie. But because at this time she had no evidence because Ed was lying, Pina let Ed pass because he was on urgent business. Finally, Ed left, but he said to Pina that all her thoughts made Pina look shabby, so he gave her advice to live life more relaxed and not think too much because this is not in the palace, but at school. Hearing this, Pina's heart was touched, because this was the first time someone had been able to deep her heart. Ed had run out of time because of the problem, and finally he managed to find McTaylor. Suddenly a female student prevented him from disturbing Taylor, and she is Ayla Jayri's main heroine. It turns out that Taylor has risen. It's because of her childhood friend Ayla, who always supports him when he falls. Ed doesn't seem to need to worry about Taylor. If his spirit collapses, then there are people nearby to support him. Ed should just focus on surviving. Ed was now relieved that the story that had deviated from the original was back on track. That was all he needed. They were both disgusted by Ed's behavior. Apart from that, there was quite a great duel with each of its powerful spells. Golden Daughter Lortle against someone. Her opponent was Janica Palarova. Taily the carefully watched the scene in awe. For Ed, this is the right moment to rise up. It looks like Lortle is having difficulty dealing with Janica's attacks. The fight ended with Janica Palarova winning. Many students cheered Janica's victory. But she saw something untoward. She saw that Lortle was quite badly injured after fighting with her. But for Ed, maybe that's what Janica needs because she has lots of friends around her. Because she couldn't possibly go to Ed's camp again. 2 weeks have passed. Ed is enjoying his life at camp. But it was very unexpected that Janica still approached him at the camp. And she asked Ed for a little advice. Janica asked Ed for advice regarding her fight with Lortle a while ago, because she had injured Lortle in that fight. That happened because Lortle used intermediate magic first, so Janica did the same thing. Janica asks Ed for advice on whether she should apologize to Lortle. Ed suggests that if it makes better, then do it. Ed knows that in the story, Janica has a critical nature. That is, if she has someone looking after her, whatever is best a good thing. But it does not erase the mistakes made. Maybe that's why she came to Ed. Ed was the only one who was less partial to Janica than her friends, and that made her relieved. Janica has a happy nature and gets along easily, but she is very observant. When she first approached Ed, he immediately asked to lend her money. At that time, Ed told her not to approach him indirectly. But Janica hopes that Ed will become a foreign entertainer for her. The next day, Ed returned to school, doing his usual activities, but unexpectedly, Lortle Caheland approached Ed. Lortle's role in the game is to be the hidden heroine. She's not like Penia. She has acted like a villain from the start. However, her true character will be revealed in the second half of the story. When he met Lortle, Ed ignored her, because if he fell into her trap, she would take the initiative. But Lortle still approached Ed, and she seemed to want to ask Ed for something important. It turns out that Lortle made an offer of 3 gold coins to Ed, with the offer that he should befriend with Janica and give her all the information. But Ed refused the offer, because he knew she was making allies to get involved in a political dispute with Penia regarding the leadership of the academy. Ed shook hands with Lortle, but he didn't take the coin. It turns out that Ed's attitude is very high, even though he is currently living a hard life and needs coins. Ed now really needs the coin, but right now he can't take it, because it would ruin the original story of the game. After failing to get Ed, Lortle tries to get Janica, and by chance they met on the street. Then they chatted with each other about the previous fight, which resulted in the Lortle being injured. But that was the plan. It turns out that Janica also knows about Lortle's plan for Ed to become her friend. She all knew what the two of them were talking about, Janica and others. The information obtained comes from the spirit she has. Janica finally leaves the place, and she apologizes to Lortle for the previous fight. But Lortle saw Janica's cheerful side full of trouble and felt danger from her. Morning arrived, but surprisingly Ed's clothes line was destroyed by Lucy. At that time he also saw the maid from the dormitory, namely Belle Meyer. She's here because she knows a lot about Ed from Janica. Belle is the perfect maid for an elite group. Her gaze is always sharp towards the person she is talking to. But what Ed saw from Belle was the package of groceries she was carrying, and Belle was surprised by the change in Ed's attitude. It seemed like Ed got the food ingredients from Belle, and he started cooking them. The food supply is probably sufficient by now. This makes the work quicker to complete before sunset. While enjoying the sunset, suddenly a light like a meteor fell in front of him. It destroyed his precious shelter. But it turns out it was Lucy's doing. Lucy teleported suddenly because Belle's actions scared her. Because Lucy didn't attend the monthly meeting held by the head of the dormitory. Ed looked annoyed at what Lucy had done, because she had destroyed his shelter. At that time there was no protective spell on her, and this was Ed's opportunity for revenge. Ed finally decided to make a cabin, and he needed to study this in the library. When he focused, there is a student looking after him, named Elka Islam. They got to know each other, and Ed told them his name. When she heard the name, Elka was a little surprised. For Ed, this was normal because of his bad family background. But Elka unexpectedly looking Ed as very different from his family, because he diligently came to the library to read lots of books. When they were saying goodbye to each other, suddenly there was a great shock. This puts Elka in danger. The violent shock turned out to be from the purple aura that occurred in the center of the academy. The students managed to evacuate to Student Square. This happened because someone made contact with the highest spirit, namely Glaskin. Peenia speculates that the one who can summon high-level spirits is Janice Palarova. She was currently being controlled by an evil spirit. Then Taylor instructed students to evacuate to the student center, because it would be dangerous for the students if Glaskin was successfully summoned. This barrier cannot be overcome by teachers and professors, because they are located outside the barrier, while the students are trapped in the barrier. The only way is to destroy this barrier from within. But it was impossible because before reaching there, they had to face middle-level spirits. Inside the barrier, there are also high-level spirits, namely Tarkan and Velosphere. Some students do not want to take the risk of facing them. How Jenica can summon this evil spirit in large numbers? It was because she was controlled by the power of the Velosphere. How could Jenica lose her mind and be controlled by an evil spirit? But that's not important for now. What's important is how they can get out of this problem. Then they all waited for Peenia's decision. As Peenia thought about the plan, Ed's words came to her mind. So the decision made by Peenia was that they would force their way deeper and face the spirits. It seemed like Peenia's plan to bring some of the talented students along was lost, because some of them were still stuck defending themselves elsewhere, and then they were the only ones left. At the same time, there is another student who has not been identified, namely Elka Islan, a librarian. Ziggs was worried about Elka, so he immediately helped her, but was blocked by Peenia because their current priority is stopping Jenica. They tell them there are other students who are with Elka, and Ziggs is curious about that. Ed Rothtailor's name is the student with Elka at the moment. Hearing this, Ziggs and the other students couldn't believe why Ed was there at this time. Ziggs looked very annoyed. Peenia held him back. Peenia tried to get Ziggs trust Elka to Ed. Hearing this, there was silence. Not long after, Ziggs immediately flew towards the library alone. Ziggs angrily went to the library alone. He broke through the mid-level spirit army with his strength. In the past, Ziggs was a nomad who was thrown away by his family. When he met Elka for the first time, he was immediately welcomed by Elka's family. Because of that, Ziggs had to help Elka. Ziggs thought that if Elka were with Ed, it would be very dangerous because of the rumors circulating. But when he reached the location, he saw Ed, seriously injured, sitting leaning against it. Seeing that, Ziggs angrily asked Ed about Elka's whereabouts. And Ed also told Ziggs about Elka's whereabouts. When he arrived at the location, Elka was fine. She just fell asleep. Ziggs was also grateful that Elka was safe. Then he looked around, that this cupboard looked big for an adult to lift, and the arrangement was neat like a wall that protected something. And these curtains are dark in color, as if to protect the sight from the severity of evil spirits. Ziggs saw a message on the blackboard, written about how not to panic about Elka when she wakes up. He speculates someone is protecting Elka. Then he saw a blood stain on this shirt, and the stain was pointing towards the exit. The stain was aimed at Ed. He was seriously injured as a result of it. Putting aside her wounds and putting Elka's safety first. 3 hours earlier, the shock made Elka unconscious, and Ed knew that some of the students had gathered in the school hall. There was a dark light that Glaskin was trying to turn on. Ed also made preparations to protect Elka while she was unconscious. But seeing the enemies this time were spirits that Ed still hadn't seen them. However, the main priority right now is to protect Elka from these monster spirits, no matter what happens. But what is certain that the amount of experience will definitely be large. Ed also defeated them all with his basic magic power. When it ended, he was seriously injured. But from these results, his magic skills up quickly. While sitting in pain, Ed saw Ziggs walking over to him, carrying Elka on his shoulder and asking about Ed's condition. Here he knows Ed's true nature. Ziggs expressed his gratitude and owed a lot of gratitude to Ed for protecting Elka from disaster. Here Ed knows that in this game Elka is Ziggs' girlfriend. Then Ziggs has a fairly important role in the game because he is a close friend of McTayley. Here Ed tells Ziggs to go help Tayley, but it seems like he still doesn't know Tayley well. Ed talked about this because he knew that in the future, Tayley would use Elemental Slash to defeat Tarkin's tough skin. Ziggs left, but Ed remembered Ziggs' words that he didn't know Tayley, because they became good friends when the fight between the two started. However, the events of episode 1 of the final arc occurred a month earlier than the original story in the game. Because Ziggs and Tayley don't know each other yet. Tayley's Elemental Slash hasn't been learned yet. Not a single attacker can deal damage to Tarkin, which means the development of the story will end. Ziggs arrived too late, but the attacking team had tried to enter, but they failed and they suffered injuries. The first attempt failed. They had lost their fighting spirit and were injured. At the same time, Ed came and gave them instructions to get up immediately, because they didn't have much time. Like it or not, Ed had to get involved in this scenario, even though this was the thing he most wanted to avoid. Because if don't, maybe the ending of this game will be different from the original story. Ed instructed to divide into 2 attack teams, but it seemed they were not happy with Ed's arrival. Clevius also criticized him, but Ziggs tried to calm him down and listen to Ed's instructions. Ed's plan is to divide 2 teams by defeating Tarkin and Velosphere simultaneously. The method is that Team 1 pulls Tarkin out and faces him. Then Team 2 entered to beat Velosphere. However, this plan has risks. If Team 1 loses, then Team 2 will face 2 bosses at once. They have to take risks if they want this problem to be resolved. However, the problem is who will face the challenge in the towing team, because this will sacrifice him. Tayley immediately appointed herself as the sacrifice, but Ed rejected this because in this game he was the MC. Ed decided that for the team against Tarkin, he would bring Clevius and Lortle, but this was opposed by both of them. At the same time, Penia made a decision using Ed's idea because she didn't have any more time. Finally, according to Ed's plan, they divided into 2 teams and went straight to their destination to face their opponents. Team 1 has arrived and will immediately fight Tarkin, but here Clevius is not confident in his strength. But Ed tried to calm Clevius and carry out his plan calmly. Clevius has so far followed Princess Penia's orders, so here he begins to convince himself by immediately moving forward to carry out Ed's plan. Unexpectedly, when he went to face Tarkin, he was alone in that place. Ed and Lortle left him. Clevius was immediately chased by Tarkin. But that was Ed's plan. Lortle was waiting outside doing something. Previously, Ed gave Lortle a plan that she had to be outside to destroy the walls of the hall's corridor. As Clevius takes his role, Ed is convinced that he is actually strong. Here Lortle's role is very important, namely making way for the attacking team and carrying out critical attacks on Tarkin. Ed believed in Lortle's intermediate magic power, that it could allow her to destroy the walls of a large corridor hall. Lortle immediately used his magic to destroy the wall. Finally, the wall was successfully destroyed, and the attacking team was able to go straight to Jenica's place. It was not without reason that Ed chose Lortle to do this, because she had previously destroyed a similar wall. Clevius succeeded in carrying out his role well, namely luring Tarkin out, and the rest of Lortle and Clevius took care of Tarkin, who jumped with no way out in the school square. But that's the goal, so they can beat Tarkin. But not without a plan when facing a Tarkin. He had an idea, then ran up to the roof of the building. Besides that, Lortle and Clevius tried to restrain the rampaging Tarkin. Ed finally managed to go upstairs to meet Lucy, who was fast asleep. What he needs now is a strong attack power. It's all written in the game guide, so Ed knows what to do. Ed immediately woke up Lucy by luring her with grilled beef jerky, and this made Lucy wake up because she smelled the aroma of beef jerky. Ed immediately stuffed Lucy's mouth with a lot of jerky, then threw it with all his strength towards Tarkan. Ed threw Lucy towards Tarkan, who was in a rage. This was done so that Lucy could use her high-level magic to damage Tarkan. Then Lucy cast her high-level magic, namely Divine Punishment. The explosion of a high-level magic attack caused by Lucy was so large that it was able to make them withstand its effects with all their strength. The fatal attack caused Tarkan's skin to weaken, and now is the time for Ed to take action by carrying out the final attack on Tarkan, so that he can gain a lot of profit and experience. When Jenica experiences an extreme level of life, because in her life there are so many people who entrust their things to Jenica, so it becomes a burden for her. And for him in the future, he will have to reply to them one by one. The attack team had already arrived to face the enemy. Then, as they saw, she was being controlled by the evil spirit monster. This happened because Jenica couldn't control her emotions anymore, and the evil spirit controlled Jenica's emotions. Ed also knew that the attack teams had already started. At the same time, the situation here was still chaotic. Because Tarkan was still aggressively attacking, even though this spirit skin was now affected by Lucy's attack. Then Lucy ran out of energy and fell asleep again. Ed plans to use a slash attack on Tarkan, but Lucy can't have that attack and Clevius can't do it either in his current state. The only way was for Ed to do it, and he entrusted his backup to Lortel. Because for Ed, this is an investment. This makes Lortel interested. Lortel prepares to back up Ed with her magic. Then Clevius seems to have run out of energy. At that moment, Ed ran forward to immediately attack Tarkan. Ed ran without slightest fear towards Tarkan, and he prepared to cast his signature magic. But this was still not close enough to attack Tarkan. At the same time, the hand of the Glasskin appeared in the sky, which caused his concentration to be divided. For Ed, this epic moment would be a shame to miss in the gaming world. But now he couldn't see and was facing a strong opponent. Lortel managed to open the gap, and she did it well, so that made Ed prepare for his signature attack on Tarkan. Ed's main magic is what he usually does every day, and this is a basic magic that many people already know, namely Wind Slash. Ed's attack was able to penetrate Tarkan so that the spirit lost. Then Ed got a lot of experience when he defeated Tarkan. Ed looked at the other fights, and it seemed like the fight was nearing its end. Taylor was the one who defeated Glasskin's revival. Taylor is truly Enmech in this game, and the fight ended with the students winning. The next day they rested under a tree because they were tired from fighting overnight. Only this time they fought seriously to survive. As a result of the fight, Lortel realized what she had done to Ed a few days ago. Then they started to get to know each other again from the beginning. Taylor approached Ed at that time to say thank you, and that he owed Ed a lot. On the one hand, Clevius still has a grudge against Ed for leaving him during the incident. Pena makes an offer to Ed in the form of a recommendation for an award to the council because he plays an important role here. But Ed refused on the grounds that Lortel and Taylor were the ones who deserved it. Then they argued with each other, and that made Ed happy. As a result of this incident, the important characters in this game get valuable things in their lives. The main characters play their respective roles and finally get the trophy of success. Then he went to an unknown place while the scenario was taking place, namely the place where the episode 1 stage ended. Ed couldn't ignore this. At other times it highlights the protagonist's success on stage. Someone has to stay backstage. Ed asked Lortel why Jenica would go on a rampage. It seemed like Lortel knew the cause. She had seen a little of Jenica's room, and it contained gifts and a number of papers stuck to the wall. According to Jenica, she is a person who really respects every word and gift from people. So she really felt like she was carrying the burden of the people who entrusted Jenica with this. Besides that, Ed was confused as to why this scenario happened a month early. The series of previous events that triggered this first act were the actions of Ed himself, a character who should no longer exist after being expelled from his dorm. Besides that, Jenica hoped that after this incident someone would look for her, but apparently not. Jenica didn't expect that the person who first found her would be Ed, but she still wanted to stay in the cupboard longer to cry ugly. Here Ed remembered the words of the spirit who told him to save Jenica. For Ed, Jennica's current scenario was a burden that had been carried for too long, causing her to make a contract with a high-level spirit. But Jennica's haste during the summoning made her prey to the dark spirit. She always smiles at everyone who cheers her on, but despite appearing to live up to everyone's expectations, she definitely has a hard time personally. Ed then tried to encourage her, even though he didn't know if these words managed to deep her heart. While the main actors were getting cheers on stage, on the other side behind the stage it was dark and quiet. The first episode's villain exits the stage as soon as the main character enters. The spirits approach them. He had seen the completion of episode 1 many times, but this was the first time he felt he had seen it to the end properly. Some low-level spirits were interested in Ed, but there were high-level spirits who were interested in Ed.